Welcome to Midweek Mysteries, and thank you for being here. I'm your host, Nick Ryan. If you're new to the show, Midweek Mysteries is a shorter version of our full-length episodes that air every Sunday, so be sure to come back and check those out as well. I'd also like to say thank you to our listeners, and of course, our supporters on Patreon. As always, we enjoy giving a personal shout-out to our newest patrons at the beginning of our full-length episodes, so if you're a new patron, be sure to tune in on Sunday. Today's first Midweek Mystery comes to us from Alyssa. Melissa's story is called Childhood Haunting. Melissa says, "Hey Nick, I'm going to cut right to the chase. I grew up in a house that my dad built right before I was born. The land he built it on was passed down in our family for many generations, but my dad was the first to build on it. We were told growing up that the land was an Indian burial site, although I have no proof of this, only hearsay. I lived in that house until I turned 18 and was old enough to move out. My first encounter was when I was about 5 or 6. I didn't have a TV in my room, so my parents let me sleep on the living room floor on weekends so I could stay up and watch Disney Channel. One night, I stayed up way later than I was used to, and I decided it was time to get some shut-eye. As soon as I was about to fall asleep, I felt a hard thump on my head. I can only compare it to someone jokingly hitting someone on the back of the head. I sat up immediately, thinking that it was my dad playing a trick on me, but I was terrified when I didn't see anyone. I woke my parents up, but they weren't convinced that I was telling the truth. A few weeks later, I was laying on my bed and felt a breeze on my legs. When I looked up, I saw my blanket slowly sliding up toward me and a dark figure. I couldn't make out a shape or form to it, just a dark mass. Many more things happened through my childhood of the like. I never blatantly saw anything until my dad passed away of brain cancer when I was 9. After that, things got scary. I used to sleep with my room door open, and every night I would wake up to my door slamming shut. If that wasn't happening, my dresser drawers would open. Once I started having sleepovers, all my friends would wake me up, seeing the same. Since I didn't have any siblings, it was nice to have some validation. I have a lot more stories of my teen years in that house, but I'll save those for another day. Thanks for reading. I love your podcast. Melissa." Our next midweek mystery comes from Brian. Brian's story is called "We'll Never Forget the Feeling." Brian says, "I never liked my family home. We moved in when I was 9. It has a natural dark energy to it, and I have had many experiences along with my family. I was first to see something strange, and then Mom. We tried telling Dad, but he didn't want to believe it, since all they had was put into the home. It was inconsistent with activity for years, but when I personally started investigating and reading about the paranormal, it got out of hand. I was about 14 and laying in bed. I usually slept with my TV on as a nightlight and something to blame for odd sounds. I woke up around 3 a.m., I guess with the TV off. I couldn't hear it. I couldn't move or open my eyes. I felt cold, especially on my arms and legs. I tried wiggling, but I couldn't. I was able with all my might to open my eyes. I regretfully wish I hadn't, as I saw 6 shadow figures. One holding each arm and leg, one next to my head, and one in the back of my room, observing. I panicked, and my fight or flight kicked in overdrive. The figure in the back pointed at me, and the one next to my head started bending down into my face. With all my might, I got my right leg free and tried kicking the figure. My leg went numb from going through it. The rest let go, and I immediately ran downstairs to my parents, who were up investigating a loud banging. I explained what had happened, and my mom showed sympathy, while my dad discredited it as a dream. I didn't go in my room for a month. That was also the beginning of a crazy 4-year stretch of paranormal activity in my parents' home. Feel free to reach out if you want more stories. Lord knows I have them. Blessings to you and everyone listening. Our next midweek mystery comes from Ben. Ben's story is called Time Slip. Ben says, "Hey Nick, I love listening to your show. I'm kind of new to your podcast, so I still haven't heard all of them yet. I wrote in recently, but after further listening to additional episodes, I realized I had an experience around the end of 2019 when I was on my way home from work. At the time, I knew something had happened, but I didn't know that it was an actual thing that has happened to other people, as I had never heard anyone ever talk about a time slip and had no idea what it was. After listening to one of your episodes, however, I realized that I think this is maybe what I experienced. It was in the dead of winter and about 6 p.m. in the evening. I was on my way home, as I had already mentioned. The sun had already set a while before, due to the time of year that it was, so it was black as night with a clear sky. I was driving down a long stretch of highway that had a couple of very distinct intersections with traffic lights, each spaced a couple of miles apart, before getting to the main interstate. I was a little worn out from my shift, but I wasn't sleepy or tired. I was wide awake and alert. I remember very vividly passing the first intersection with a green light. Then 2 miles down the road, I once again passed the exact same intersection, as if I had never gone through it to begin with. I continued down the road to the rest of the intersections like usual without incident. Obviously, I was very confused, and it caused me to feel a little disoriented, but only because I had just been there, 2 miles farther back, and then again, right now. Even though the whole time I was going in a straight line, no curves, no turns, no other cars. At the time I was alone in my car, and nobody was home waiting for me. I wasn't really paying attention to the time. Maybe I would have if I knew about this sort of thing sooner. This is the first and only experience I've ever had with a time slip in my life. Maybe this was more of a déjà vu? I'm not sure. I just know what I saw and what happened. I don't think I was abducted or anything, but at the same time, it just honestly felt like I was in an episode of The Twilight Zone in real life. It was truly surreal. Thanks for letting me get this off my chest. I have never told a single person about this before, and don't plan to do so, for fear of being brushed off and not being taken seriously. Thanks, Ben. Our next midweek mystery comes to us from Alyssa. Alyssa's story is called The Demon in the Basement. Melissa says, I'm very happy to know there are people who have experienced the paranormal, and after 10 years, I can finally share my story without sounding crazy. I will try and make my story as detailed and as short as possible. When I was 16 years old and moved into a house with my mom and dad in Regina, we were having a lot of strange things happening. We heard noises, things were moving on their own, and we always saw a man in a black suit with a top hat on by the window. Me and my mom have always been able to see and hear things most others can't. My dad didn't believe in anything supernatural, because it was just easier for him that way. After being in the house for a month, things started to get more and more strange. I have always been a person who is scared of the paranormal. Even coming up behind me frightened me. When I was going to sleep at night, I would feel so uneasy that something wasn't right. I would turn around and cover my head with a blanket to sleep. Once I was finally able to get to sleep, I would wake up around 3 o'clock in the morning, every night, in my closet. I don't know how I got there. I don't remember waking up, but this is where I always woke up for almost 2 weeks. I talked to my mom about what was happening, and she believed me because of the things that she could see as well. Finally, we had had enough, and we decided to hire some people to come out to the house and see if we could find something. There were cameras set up all over the house, in every corner you can think of, which were all connected to a computer, and people walking around the house with what looked like tape recorders. From the hours of 10 o'clock until 2:30 in the morning, nothing happened that night. I didn't go to bed at my usual time, and I stayed downstairs with everybody else. I was too scared. We heard noises coming from my bedroom. We heard the closet door open and close. On camera, my blanket was being pulled off of my bed and put into my closet, and I told my mom that every night I wake up in my closet around 3 o'clock in the morning. This was a very scary moment for us. After that night, the people with their cameras and recorders went back to their usual business and told us that they would contact us in the next few weeks to do another viewing, and if anything happened, we were to call them. Things were okay for the next few days, until Thursday night. We kept hearing noises coming from the basement, and this time, it was like a raspy man's voice. We couldn't make out what he was saying, but it didn't sound human. My mom spoke with an elder the next day, and asked what she could use to smudge the house. We weren't of that culture, but we were told it may help. She then brought home some sage and smudging material and a paper with directions on how to properly use it in our home. Myself, my mom, and my father all sat in the bedroom. She said we had to hold hands and that we need to believe. If only 2 out of the 3 of us believe, it's not going to work. Me and my mom believed, and we told my dad that he really had to try. Once we said our prayer, we started rolling smoke around the bedrooms, and my mom said a prayer. After the prayer, she made a cross with the ashes above the doorway, and we then moved from the bedroom into the living room, where we held hands and said a prayer and did the same thing. As we got closer to the basement, the air got cool, and the hairs on our arms stood up on their own. We knew something was there, and it knew that we were there. Our house was set up in a way where the bathroom was right beside the basement. We all held hands and my mom said her prayer, and before she could put a cross above the door, something grabbed my hair, lifted me, and threw me into the bathtub. My head started to bleed, and then everything went black. What I'm going to tell you from this point on is what my mom and dad saw after I got pushed into the tub. I stood up with my eyes rolled back in my head. In a deep, echoing, and screeching voice, I said, "Get out," and then I fell to the floor. My dad picked my heavy unconscious body up and carried me to the car, and after driving for about 10 minutes away from the city, I woke up, laying in the back seat. My lungs hurt, everything felt heavy, and my head hurt. I asked my mom what happened. How did I get from the house to the car? And why is my head bleeding? My dad pulled over, and my mom ran to my side of the car and hugged me harder than she's ever in my life. That day, my parents dropped me off at my aunt's house, and they packed up and did a one-day move. They knew that whoever or whatever was there didn't want us to be there. A few months down the road, we went to visit our old friends on that same block, and we asked them if anyone had moved in. They told us that since we moved, there have been 3 families that have moved in, and none of them had lasted more than 2 weeks. After 10 years, the house is still vacant. I still live in the same city, and I drive down that street once in a while. When I do, I get flashbacks of what happened, and the hair on my arms sticks up, and I feel like my airways are heavy. This has by far been the scariest experience of my life. I do believe there is a dark side and a good side. Thank you for listening to my story. Stay safe. As we come to the end of this edition of Midweek Mysteries, I'd like to say thank you to all of you for tuning in and supporting the podcast, and a special thank you to Melissa, Brian, Ben, and Melissa for writing in and sharing their experiences with all of us. Until next time, I hope you all have a safe and healthy rest of the week, and we'll see you back here on Sunday for our next full-length episode. If you or someone that you know has witnessed something unexplainable, and you'd like to have your story shared on the podcast, please contact me at paranormalmysteriespodcast@gmail.com, or visit paranormalmysteriespodcast.com and click on the Tell Your Story link. Please remember, no matter how insignificant or outlandish you believe your experience may seem, I'd like to hear about it. You can also connect with us by joining our forum and by following us on social media. All of our contact information can be found in the show notes. If you'd like to support the podcast, be sure to subscribe to the show and share it with your friends. If you're interested in taking the next step and becoming a patron, you can visit patreon.com/paranormal mysteries. Benefits include ad-free episodes and early access to select shows. New episodes of the Paranormal Mysteries podcast are produced every Sunday, with the new Midweek Mysteries airing every Wednesday, and they're available on all of your favorite podcast apps. From all of us at the Paranormal Mysteries podcast, thank you for listening, and remember, don't wait for the unknown to come to you. Get out there and find it.